Okay, everybody, I am grateful that you're on this month's call. So far, we've got about 47 attendees. That's fantastic. This month, we're going to talk about our two products that we've been highlighting and advertising are the oil and the bloom. So we'll go through weight gain and the hard keeper, really. That's really when we're talking about our oil. And then you're fortunate, I've just been to a conference talking with one of our suppliers, Zinpro. So we'll talk a little bit more about that and more about the bloom and skin and coat health. So let's go ahead and get started. And we'll go to the oil first, just the straight label. All oils are going to be 98 to 99% fat. It doesn't matter whether it's, corn oil or coconut oil or DAC oil or any oil. They're all going to have the same fat content. And then when you go down the list, it's what else are you getting out of that oil? Because they also they'll all really put weight on your horse the same way. I'm not going to lie to you and say that corn oil is not going to be as beneficial as canola oil for putting weight on your horse, but there are many other reasons why we feed oil to horses and the other things that we might be getting out of it. So if you look down the list of the guaranteed analyses here, you'll see vitamin E. Now, the formula, of the DAC oil had a small amount of vitamin E in it, but really it was just as a natural preservative. Now, the vitamin E is in there at a significant rate. 4,000 IUs per pound is significant. So the requirement for a 1,000-pound horse per day is 500 IUs per day. So in just 2 squirts or 2 ounces, you're going to get your daily requirement for vitamin E just out of the DAC oil. I'm sure whatever else you're feeding is also going to contain some vitamin E. So that's really ideal. Now, if you're feeding the larger quantities, the 4, 6, 8, 16 ounces, then you're definitely getting very significant amounts of 100% natural vitamin E. We keep going over this because still I hear, oh, the DAC oil's changed. We never make changes for no reason. We make changes to move us forward because we lead nutrition. The old formula was primarily corn oil. Now, corn oil is very palatable to horses, but it's also very high in omega-6 fatty acids, and we want to make sure we're not necessarily heightening those in the diet because they're pro-inflammatory. The new formula is primarily canola oil. It's got a clearer color because it also doesn't have sediment. That sediment in the old formula wasn't necessarily of any nutritional value. So the new oil is much, much better oil. The vitamin E content I just think is exceptional. And if you're feeding 2 cups of oil for a lot of weight gain, weight maintenance, we've got at least the 4,000 IUs there. That's a very therapeutic dose. Some other oils out there that we may compete with, that you may have your clients ask you about. The coca soy oil, coconut blended with soybean oil. And really, when you look at the label, it's primarily soybean oil with a dash of coconut oil. So there's no significant amounts of vitamin E in that product in any form, synthetic or natural. And there are no marine-based omega-3s. And you will note here in the DAC oil, we have a small amount of fish oil, which is going to supply some of those marine-based omega-3s, that DHA, as well as the flaxseed oil that's going to supply you with that ALA, both sources of omega-3 fatty acids. The Health E oil in this big white container, which is different to the black container, which is called the same thing. The Health E oil has natural vitamin E in it, but it's only at 1,000 IUs per pound. So we've got 4 times the amount of natural vitamin E, and it doesn't have any marine-based omega-3s. It's primarily soybean oil, and that soybean oil is higher in omega-6 fatty acids than the canola oil. That's why we chose to go with canola oil when we moved away from the corn oil. The healthy E oil, I don't know how this is legal that their names are so similar, but I digress, contains natural vitamin E, but it's only at 250 IUs per pound. So again, we've got significantly more than that in our product. And again, no marine-based omega-3s. It's primarily soybean oil. Again, that soybean oil is going to be higher in omega-6s, so more of those pro-inflammatory amounts. This product, the wheat germ oil blend, it does have natural vitamin E at 2,400 IUs, but again, we're 4,000, so we're double the amount, and no marine-based omega-3 fatty acids. Now, this is not an oil, but I put this Elevate powder, this is a vitamin E supplement. I put this here so that you can show people that in our oil, when you're feeding large quantities, you have the same, if not more, vitamin E than this powder, which is specifically designed to supply vitamin E. So the maintenance dose for this Elevate product is 1 to 2 scoops per day, and that's going to give you 1,000 to 2,000 IUs of vitamin E, natural vitamin E per day. Well, we can easily do that in 4 to 6 pumps, which is quite normal for a horse that's exercising. Intense training, 3 to 5 scoops per day will give you 3,000 to 5,000 IUs of vitamin E. Again, at 2 cups, we're giving you the 4,000 IUs. So I put that up there because one might think, well, I'm feeding Elevate because it's got the most vitamin E. There's no way your oil could be anywhere close to that. But really, when you're feeding the 2 cups of oil a day, you're right up there with therapeutic doses of natural vitamin E. I put this up here again. I know we keep going over these. The reps were very gracious at the end of last year, I think, or last year sometime. I requested that we go through and they give me their comments on all of the products and what they said about the products. And so I was able to critically evaluate each of those comments. And what I've highlighted here, excuse me, incorrect statements that I wouldn't recommend that you say because they're not correct. And the black is good, and the green I thought was ideal. So, people, some of the things I want to point out that you probably shouldn't say. It has a correct amount of omega-3 to 6 fatty acid ratio. There is no correct omega-3 to 6 fatty acid ratio. So don't let anyone tell you they've got an ideal ratio. There is no ideal ratio. What we want to do is increase the amount of omega-3s in the diet. But there's no ideal amount. There's no ideal amount of omega-6s. So a 5-grain blend, it's not a 5-grain blend. There's only 1 grain really in it, and that's the canola. Flax is a seed. Wheat germ is also a seed. So you could call it 1-grain blend. Flaxseed oil as an aid to digestion, and flaxseed does not aid digestion. Omega-3s, whilst they have a lot of extremely beneficial qualities, don't really aid digestion. This calorie-dense oil provides more fat than rice bran and beet pulp, and that was 100% correct. And that's something that I really like to point out when people are trying to find a very calorie-dense ingredient to add to their feed to put weight on a horse quickly and safely. Oil is much more beneficial than rice bran or beet pulp. And as we go to the next slide, we can kind of understand that a little better. So some of you may have seen this, and may be a little recap, but I think it's always neat to go over. And say we have that 1,000, 1,100 pound horse. He's got a body condition score of, say, 4, but we want him to be a 5. To change that horse's body condition score by 1 unit, that is going to take 40 to 45 pounds of gain. And what most people want to know is how quickly can they do that, and how much do I actually have to feed in order to get that weight gain. So if we go to that 40 pounds of gain, safe to assume 1 body condition score gain in 60 days or 2 months, based on the amount of extra calories you need above maintenance for 1 pound of gain, times that by 40 for 40 pounds of gain, and I've averaged that out safely over 60 days. So if we look at this chart, on the left-hand side is what ingredients people typically use to put weight on their horse. So we've got oats and rice bran and beet pulp and alfalfa hay and oil. And these are all quite nice ingredients for extra calories. But it depends on the amount of calories you need and how quickly you want to do it. So let's say we want to put that 40 pounds of gain on a horse as quickly as we can, safely, we say 60 days. If you're going to choose oats, let's just say currently we're feeding 4 pounds of textured feed or pellets and 15 pounds of hay. He's not gaining any weight, he's not losing weight, he's just maintaining. If you were to use oats over and above what you're currently feeding that animal, you would have to add nearly 4.5 pounds of oats a day. So that's quite significant. Most horses that are thin because they don't want to eat. Now you're adding 4.5 pounds on top of what you're already feeding. Then you're also adding a lot of extra starch, which may not be beneficial to these horses for gastrointestinal health. Rice bran has the same calorie content as oats. Those calories in rice bran do come from fat, some starches. And so you'd have to feed about 4.5 pounds of rice bran, but most people have seen rice bran in comparison to oats, and rice bran is very fluffy, not very dense. So 4.5 pounds of rice bran volume-wise in a tub is a lot. Beet pulp, I know most people have used beet pulp as a weight gain supplement. Most people have fed it. It is super fiber. I love beet pulp, but you can see the calorie content, the amount of energy in beet pulp is less than oats and rice bran. So if you're just relying on beet pulp, you're going to have to feed a little over 5 pounds of beet pulp a day. Now that's dry beet pulp. I recommend non-molassed beet pulp. So when you add water to that, as most people do, that's going to be about 10 to 15 pounds of beet pulp. So that's quite difficult to get a horse to eat that much beet pulp for weight gain. So whilst it's a good addition to my program, I don't rely on it solely for weight gain. Alfalfa hay in any form, be it pellets, cubes, or long stem hay, will give you that weight gain if you're feeding about 6 pounds a day on top of what you were feeding before. But you can see here, based on the amount of calories per pound in oil, it's over 4 times calorie dense than some of these other ingredients. A little over 2 cups of oil a day will give you that weight gain, and most horses won't even know that you've added that to the diet if you add it gradually and you split it up over 3 meals. It's safe digestively. It's not going to add starches or sugars to the diet. It's not going to add any digestive disruption. Oil is always my go-to. The DAC oil is quite palatable. Horses, as I said, usually don't even know it's there. So for sheer weight gain, you're up around the 2 cups. That's also going to give you 4,000 IUs a day of natural vitamin E. And for a thin horse, if you think about vitamin E is stored in the horse's fat. If a horse is thin, they don't have a lot of fat coverage, they're not able to store much vitamin E, so they're even more deficient. So feeding a thin horse oil to bring up its weight, but that extra vitamin E in it is also exceptionally crucial to that horse. It's also been shown as far as behavior that when you add calorie sources from fat, i.e. our DAC oil, versus sugars and starches from grain, you can have a calmer demeanor. So the actual energy pathways used when you add fat to the diet don't exacerbate behavior and cause this kind of hyper behavior. So I think I had a picture. My picture's disappeared. But anyway, let me try and find it. There it is. And then we'll go back. So with this graphic here, if we now move on to talking about hair coat, we've talked a little bit about weight gain, but I also want to talk about the other reasons why we feed oil and bloom to horses, and that's hair quality or hair shine. Some of you have seen this graphic before. So this is the top layer of the skin here, this dark orange kind of line. This is the piece of the hair that we see. We call that the hair shaft. And down here, this is underneath the skin in the dermis layer. We've got the hair follicle and the hair bulb. That's where there's a lot of blood supply. You can see from this graphic over here, that blood supply feeding that hair bulb and hair follicle, all of its nutrients. And then if we go further up, we see this sebaceous gland or fat gland, and that is what actually lubricates the hair shaft. So if you're feeding fat to your horses, this sebaceous gland will stay full, and so we'll able to continue to lubricate that hair shaft. And then when the light shines on that hair shaft that's lubricated by that fat, it will reflect, it'll be shiny. I always go back to horses in the wild, and why would they need to have this sebaceous gland? In the wild, they need to have that sebaceous gland, not necessarily because any of these horses care about being shiny, but that fat coating on the hair shaft and on the skin actually protects that skin from the elements, from rain, from insects, etc. So that goes to my next point of not washing your horse too often, because you're going to wash off that natural protection to the skin, and you'll actually dry your horse's skin out more by washing them too often. You can also see this muscle here that goes from the skin down to the root base of that hair, and that's called the erector pili muscle, and that is responsible for making the hair stand up when the horse gets cold. So one of the most brilliant natural mechanisms of the horse is its ability to thermoregulate. So in the wintertime, when they puff up their hair, because these erector pili muscles actually make that hair stand up, they actually develop this air pocket here between the skin and the end of the hair shaft, and that acts as a natural insulator to that horse. But when we stick a blanket on them, we squash down that hair shaft and take away that natural insulation. So horses out in the wild, or out in a field, I always say, don't put blankets on them, just leave their hair long, unless you're riding them often and then you've got to clip them. But now let's go back to Bloom. So Bloom is the other supplement that DAC offers, and when we think about adding fat to the diet or adding coat quality, we also think about Bloom. Bloom is only 35% fat versus the oil, which is 98% fat, so the calorie content of Bloom is much less. A lot of us have kind of talked about Bloom as a protein supplement. It's not necessarily a high protein supplement. You see here it says 27% protein, and that sounds like a lot, but when you think about how much protein a horse needs in a day, just that average size 1,100-pound horse during light exercise, crude protein requirement for the day is 700 grams per day of crude protein. And per ounce in the Bloom, you're going to get 7.6 grams of protein. So that would take 92 ounces of Bloom to give me my daily requirement. So don't rely on Bloom for all of your protein for the day. That being said, adding Bloom to the diet will add some extra protein, and it's good quality protein because it's high in lysine and methionine. But the other way that I think about Bloom is the oil helps lubricate that hair shaft. It gives you a shiny coat. Help a little bit with skin flexibility. But it's the Bloom that's going to fix damaged hair and damaged skin. And one of the big things, excuse me, in the Bloom that I think a lot of people forget about is the zinc and the biotin. And the zinc is absolutely critical for skin, hair, and immune function. So we'll briefly go through this. One of the comments that someone made was cool calories made up of amino acids. Cool calories is not amino acids. Cool calories is the fat source in the Bloom, and it's a prilled or powdered fat, vegetable fat, but there's no amino acids in it. The amino acids are coming from the soy, the ground extruded soybean meals is where that amino acid is coming from, as well as the added methionine and lysine. So, put weight on without bulky items like rice bran. Yes, the Bloom is also going to be good for putting weight on because it's 35% fat versus your rice bran is only 20% fat. But for a pure weight gain, we're always going to go with the oil. Now, if we compare to some of our other supplements out there that people buy for weight gain, the Neutrogena Empower Boost is only 22% fat, and the Amplify supplement put out by Purina is only 30% fat. So the Bloom is 35% fat. Maxi Glow, which is a rice bran brand, is only 18% fat. We talked about the hair. Now let's talk about some of the individual ingredients in the Bloom. So the biotin. Biotin is really critical for skin integrity. We also know that it's really important for hoof quality. Well, think about hoof as just hard hair. Anything that's good for the hoof is also good for the hair. Because as I said, hoof is just hard hair. But also, you got to think about biotin when it comes to actual skin quality. Biotin deficiency is very rare because horses make biotin in the hindgut. The bacteria in the hindgut make biotin. But when it does, we'll say that horses can often become biotin insufficient. They're not necessarily deficient, but they just don't quite have enough because they're not on a high fiber diet, or the bacteria in the hindgut just aren't functioning properly. So what might you notice in that animal? Dry, irritated skin, and this transfers over to dogs too. Brittle hair or hair loss, sometimes even lack of energy and chronic fatigue, digestive and intestinal tract issues as well. Biotin acts as a coenzyme in the body, so it's also, funnily enough, needed for the metabolism of fatty acids, for proteins, and for energy sources. Biotin, this came from, human nutrition. A lot of this comes from human. Also helps keep young, attractive appearance since it plays such an important role in maintaining health in hair, skin, and nails. In the past, it was called sometimes the nickname of vitamin H, which stems from the German word Haar or Haut, which means hair and skin. So way, way back when, biotin has always been associated with hair quality and skin quality. Now we're going to go into some dog research, and I know we're talking about horses, but we can apply this research to horses as well. This has been some really neat research looking at biotin deficiency in dogs. So signs of biotin deficiency include hair loss, scaly red rash around the eyes, nose, mouth, sometimes even around the genital area. In a collaborative study between a lot of veterinarians, they took 119 dogs with fur and skin condition, and they actually added additional biotin, 5 milligrams of biotin, per 10 kilograms of body weight for 3 to 5 weeks. In 60% of cases, reported all symptoms cured, 30% reported an improvement, and only 9% reported no effect, when potentially it may have been caused by a bacteria or something else causing that alopecia. Most of us as equine nutritionists recommend 20 milligrams per head per day to improve hoof horn, but this takes a lot longer. So in the dogs, we were able to see a skin improvement in 3 to 5 weeks, but when it comes to hoof quality, 8 to 12 months. But if you're looking at skin and coat improvement, rebuilding that dull, brittle hair, again, anywhere from 3 to 5 weeks, you're going to see the Bloom affect coat quality in the horse. Now, what about zinc? Zinc also has been around for centuries. Zinc has been used empirically for over 3,500 years, and no, there's not necessarily a lot of scientific evidence, but it was documented as one of the most most used medicinal supplements in Egyptian medicine, and they also used it as a topical therapy. Now this, I think, is a really neat graphic. It shows us where skin resides. 20% of the body's skin stores are in the outer layer of the skin. So this is down out here on the external layer of skin. So we've got flaking off of dead keratinocytes. which are skin cells. Down here is the next layer of skin, and then down here where we have the actual living part of our skin. And there's so much. 20% of our zinc stores are right here in the skin. Why are they there? Because they are extremely important for skin integrity. They hold the skin together. If a person is very deficient in zinc, or a dog or a cat or a horse, their skin will be very brittle and it will break. And so they'll be they'll have a lot of lesions or sores, and that will expose that tissue to bacteria infections. So it's very important when you think about skin and coat quality that you think about zinc. Zinc concentrations tend to be greater in tissues with high epithelial proliferation rates. Really what that means, as we go back here, the skin turns over very quickly. That's where you want to have a lot of zinc. It's very important in that turnover of important skin, and that also happens in the hoof. Highest concentrations are in areas of pressure, so foot pads in the hooves. That's where you'll get a lot of zinc. Also, if you think about dogs, on the tissue on their nose as well as on the tongue, there's a lot of zinc cells, zinc, right in that external tissue. Wound healing. How do we use zinc in immune function? Wound healing, because it can put that skin back together. It's maintaining healthy integrity of the skin because it can repair the skin. Regulating the immune system by getting rid of some of these anti-inflammatory factors. Possesses antiviral activity. So this is another study in dogs, in Labrador dogs, looking at feeding a zinc and omega-3 fatty acid diet. 32 milligrams of zinc with 5.5 grams of alpha-linoleic acid, our ALA. And you can see the changes in, now we're looking just at coat gloss because we've improved that. So if we have that hair shaft and it's all brittle and broken, it doesn't matter how much oil you lubricate it with, it's still not going to reflect the light nicely. But if you can make that hair shaft smooth and sleek because it's healthy and it's not brittle, and then you lubricate with oil, then we're going to have a really nice shine. So in these dogs, the control animals didn't have added zinc or ALA in the diet. These animals just had the omega-3 fatty acids, and these animals just had the zinc. These animals here had the omega-3s and the zinc combined, and you can see how elevated that coat shine was. And this here shows a change in score because they're able to score the coat of these animals, and it was very much improved in these dogs. And so you could say this is absolutely happening in horses as well. So where does the zinc come from in our minerals, in our DAC bloom? And it comes from a company called Zinpro Performance Minerals. And it's a chelated form of zinc, and it's very, very available. It's the type of chelated formation that makes it very available. It makes it very stable. And it also is actually making it into the digestive system and not getting broken down. So this was a study looking at the coat quality of these blue foxes, Arctic blue foxes. And when they were fed, in comparison, because we could say, well, you can just feed these inorganic or sulfated types of zinc. If they were fed no zinc, the fur density, the amount of quality of fur was really low. If you fed 40% of these sulfated minerals, these inorganic minerals, versus 40% or 40-40 of the available Zinpro zinc. This here is 100% or 80 ppms of the Zinpro zinc, and you can see they've got the best quality fur. And then if you're down here, looking at different sources of zinc. So really what this is pointing out is that Zinpro zinc that we incorporate in the bloom improves fur density. So what that means is the amount of hairs per square centimeter is going to be much more elevated. And when you've got a nice evenly distributed hair coat, that's really ideal in the horse. This is looking again at dogs and looking at that Zinpro zinc methionine complex on these German short hair pointers and looking at skin quality. And you can see here all these lesions pre-treatment, and then 10 weeks after adding the Zinpro zinc at 1.6 milligrams per kilogram body weight, and you can see that that dog's hair coat is not completely rejuvenated, but marked improvement. So it's important not only that you're adding zinc to the diet, but it's the source of zinc that you're adding to the diet. And we're adding that Zinpro zinc, which is really, really ideal. And any of you that were at the DAC dealer days last year got to listen to one of their head scientists, Dr. Connie Larson, and I think everybody was quite impressed. So with that, any questions? I will unmute everybody and hopefully we don't get awful sounds. Questions? Oops.
I have a question, Tina. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. If you would end up feeding a horse that was under body weight, the amount of 2 cups of oil at a time, would they not have some kind of diarrhea by any chance?
Oh, yeah. And if you just went home today and just added it to the diet, absolutely they're going to have diarrhea. That's why I say gradual introduction, just like any change in feed. And when you're feeding 2 cups of oil a day, I prefer, with most of your average 1,000, 1,100 pound horses, that you're going to add that to the diet over 3 meals. Now, if you've got a pulling horse that's 2,000 pounds and you do 2 cups in 1 meal, they're not going to know the difference. But absolutely gradually introduce it. And I do like to spread it out over multiple meals.
Okay. Thank you.
No problem. Good question. Other questions?
Hi, Tanya. I have 2 questions. How does our DAC oil compare to the Equine Omega Complete? That seems to be a big one in my area that we're seeing.
The Equine Omega, I think, is just soybean oil, and so it's just your plant-based omega-3s. And I also, like, the DAC oil is not an exceptionally great source of omega-3 fatty acids. If you want omega-3 fatty acids, you have to go to the DHA Perform. That is excellent sources of omega-3 fatty acids, and it's the omega-3 fatty acids that the animal can actually use. So I wouldn't be really comparing the Equine Omega to the DAC oil because neither of them are great for omega-3 fatty acids. If you really want omega-3s in the diet, you've got to go to DHA Perform. As far as if a person is feeding Equine Omega oil and they want to, feed the DAC oil, the other benefit that we give you is 4,000 IUs a day of natural vitamin E if you're feeding large quantities. I mean, that to me is a real improvement over many of the other oils because our horses, especially on the East Coast, and I could say in California, they don't eat grass, and that's where horses get vitamin E from. So I have this epidemic of low vitamin E in horses across the country. Hope that helps.
Yes. And then second question is the oil in bloom. Are they safe for dogs? Yes.
Oil in both products is safe for dogs. Absolutely. We have a lot of people say their dogs just love the taste of it and they lick it. And that's why I put those dog slides in there. Sometimes we have to take other animals' research and apply it to horses. But I know that a lot of our horse owners also have dogs. So Bloom is absolutely fantastic for dogs.
Tanya, this is Stacy. Can you overdose on vitamin E?
You're never going to. I mean, yeah, you can. I mean, if you get up to around 10,000 IUs a day, then you start to block the uptake of vitamin A, another vitamin that you get from fresh green grass, so they're already pretty deficient in it.
Right.
But so when I recommend large quantities, therapeutic doses of vitamin E to most clients, I don't like to go over 5,000 IUs of vitamin E a day. Now, if you've got a fat horse that you need to give vitamin E to, then obviously you're not going to be feeding the oil. But I may go up to 8,000. I'm very skeptical about going close to 10,000 because, as I say, you can really interfere with the uptake of vitamin A as well. Other questions? Okay, I'm going to stop the recording now and thank everybody, but we can ask more questions afterwards if you like.